Dr. Tarpley, great to have you here with us.
Thank you.
Well, let's get into what I was just covering. Ahmadinejad comes out and says, well, you know what he said. He said, I'm an engineer, and it looks like those are controlled demolition. And then Al-Qaeda comes out and says, no, we did it, with no proof of who even puts out this Aspire magazine.
I guess politics makes strange bedfellows. The speech by Ahmadinejad last week at the United Nations, I think, was probably the best of the entire session, because he went through a whole part on the immiseration of the world, the poverty levels, the tremendous wealth disparities, wealth inequalities, how this is actually getting worse and not better. He talked about the dysfunctionality of the international institutions, how the United Nations doesn't work. It's dominated by a clique of rich imperialist countries at the cost of everybody else. And then also in the speech at the United Nations, he said, there's basically a climate of neo-McCarthyism in the Western world, where if you bring up objections to the official story of 9/11, you're going to be threatened and intimidated. And he said the Iranian government had been threatened and intimidated when a year or two ago he brought up the question of having an international commission on 9/11, which would be a great idea, and he should go ahead and do it, and don't mind the intimidation. So this is now continuation. The Al-Qaeda, I guess they're going to take the Arlen Specter Award for the most imaginative defense of the official version so far, which is to say we're Al-Qaeda and that's not how we did it. This is absolutely ridiculous. We just have to remember what we've learned in Libya is that Al-Qaeda is the CIA Arab Legion. It always has been, it always will be, and that's who's telling you these things. So that's the CIA speaking through Al-Qaeda saying, no, it was not controlled demolition, it was the official story.
Well, Webster, routinely, you'll see an AP headline as if it's fact. Al-Qaeda says you better pass carbon taxes. They actually said that last year, or we're going to attack you. So now even Al-Qaeda supports Al Gore and this new bankster tax. I mean, just cartoonish, comic book. And it just continues on from there. But then you'll read in the bottom of the AP articles, it'll say this was posted on a message board and was unconfirmed. It should say unconfirmed message board, Al-Qaeda says pay Al Gore money, or unconfirmed message board, or Inspire magazine, which I know has Western intelligence links. You've got Anwar al-Awlaki hanging out secretly at the Pentagon. You've got Adam Gadon, you know, hooked up with the ADL, coming out with all these videos. I mean, this is ridiculous. But as you said, I was going to go to Libya last, but now let's go to it first because you raise it. Now they're confirming, ABC News is, thousands of heat-seeking shoulder-launched missiles have fallen into Al-Qaeda's hands in Libya, so U.S. forces have to go in. And of course, Gaddafi's still fighting on. We should point out recently you were actually in Libya. And I mean, this is so predictable. First, they use Al-Qaeda to start the attempted overthrow. They call them freedom fighters who are nonviolent. Then they put Al-Qaeda in command of the cities they've got. The Gaddafi forces, the anti-Al-Qaeda forces fight on. And now they're saying we've got to invade to get military force to knock out Gaddafi because Al-Qaeda might get missiles. I mean, they're just counting on the American people not having any grasp of anything that's happening.
Today we had the amazing spectacle of an Al-Qaeda spokesman from the Libyan Islamic Fighting Group. This is the infamous Belhaj, alias Hassadi, alias Hasidi, and a butcher who has left a trail of blood and corpses across the world, from Southeast Asia to the Indian subcontinent to the Middle East and many other places. So now this Belhaj, an Al-Qaeda butcher and killer who's got the blood of American troops on his hands, not only did he kill them himself, but he sent fighters into Afghanistan and Iraq to kill the GIs and also other NATO forces.
And he brags about it. This is undisputed.
Not only does he brag, but he wants to be a victim. See, in the modern politically correct world, you've got to be a victim. So he's also a victim because he was tortured by the CIA after they caught him. His right-hand man is Gumu. That's bin Laden's chauffeur, who spent 6 years in Guantanamo Bay concentration camp. So this is a guy who is now interviewed as a responsible spokesman for the Libyan revolution in the pages of the London Guardian. So,
and by the way, you were the first person I heard like 8 years ago when they first opened up Guantanamo saying that it was really a sheep dipping operation where people supposedly disappeared into it to give them street cred with, you know, Muslim fighters or whatever, jihadis, but really they'd already been sent off to other areas to be trained. Now that's admitted. that really it's just a cutout, that the real black sites and ghost sites are in other parts of the world with the real tortures going on. I mean, how transparent does this get? And now we've got to, A, give up our rights because the thousands of missiles are in the jihadis' hands, and B, they're saying drones are being deployed to Libya to fight al-Qaeda all over Africa. African now comes in, exactly what you said, word for word. In the Obama deception, now almost 3 years ago, we even show graphics as you speak of U.S. troops in NATO invading Libya.
Well, Gaddafi is in the field and fighting. He's full of defiance. He makes statements through Syria. There's a television station in Syria that broadcasts these statements. Musa Ibrahim, the information minister, is in the field and fighting. Saeed al-Islam is in the field and fighting. And the other son, Kamis, is there. Daughter Aisha is making statements from, I guess, from Algeria, where she has taken refuge. So the Gaddafi command structure is pretty much intact. The rebels are militarily impotent. You can see that these people, they're good at butchering women and children, but they're no good at going up against Gaddafi's veterans.
Now, wait a minute. They're not, listen, they are good at butchering blacks. You were also one of the first to say, because you traveled over there, that they were 6 months ago exterminating blacks in the East when they took control. But isn't that a politically correct sacrament, that they're exterminating blacks on sight?
Well, they are, but right now they're trying to take the city of Sirte. They failed. This has been going on now for about a month. Remember, the big NATO attack on Tripoli was the 22nd of August, and now it's almost October. They can't take Sirte. They can't take Bani Walid. They can't take Saba down in the desert. And then there's this whole area of Fezzan and the south and related parts of Libya where the rebels basically have no political control whatsoever. So this is shaping up as a civil war. The bottom line lesson, though, is, strangely enough, if you're from al-Qaeda and you're in Pakistan, then the U.S. wants to kill you. They want to blow up your wedding party with a Predator drone. But if you're al-Qaeda in Libya, then you're going to get billions of dollars from the State Department, all the seized assets, the most modern weapons. Hillary Clinton is going to come and coquette with you, and God knows what else. And
it comes out that Tony Blair is in 6 secret meetings in the last few years with Gaddafi doing business deals. Obviously, this is also about stealing the billions of Libyan money that he invested trying to come in out of the cold. But we've got to move on to other issues here, Webster. And you really are a resident expert on Libya because you were there during the bombardment. But let's move on to the end game, because I said this at the time. I said, okay, if I'm thinking like a globalist, like one of these Anglo-American New World Order guys, you use al-Qaeda, just disdaining the Western public. You use al-Qaeda to overthrow, to get in control. There's still rebel forces now, that will fight back against that takeover by the West with their jihadi frontmen out of Saudi Arabia and other areas. Then you start exporting terror out of Libya to Europe and the United States, using that to take liberties and freedoms, and just use the media to ignore the fact that you put them in power. But I expected that it would take a year or two, that they would at least think that people would have a memory, so they would wait some. They're not even waiting. They're already saying, give your rights up, checkpoints everywhere. Al-Qaeda took Libya, and then that's an excuse to bring troops and NATO into Libya to fight the people they, quote, put in, but they don't actually even fight them. It's just like this mock fake chess piece they put on the board and say, we can invade anywhere we say. I mean, I know I'm ranting. It's just so absurd.
The Anglo-Americans, though, I think are in trouble on a number of fronts. If the question of the Palestinian state comes before the United Nations Security Council, and if Obama vetoes it, that will basically put an end to this entire idiotic wave of color revolutions and CIA people power coups. The so-called Arab Spring will turn into the Arab Winter in that moment. And it's very likely that as a result of that, Saudi Arabia will finally come to the parting of the ways with the United States, which is what Prince Turkey threatened in a very important op-ed in the Washington Post at the beginning of the summer.
Speaking of Turkey, not just Saudi Arabia, but not just Prince Turkey, Turkey, as you know, is moving away. And it was, Israel, again, you 2 years ago, or 3, said that Saudi Arabia was quietly trying to work with Russia and Pakistan. Now that's been confirmed. So those rifts are there.
So the Saudis are, I think, coming to the parting of the ways with the U.S. The color revolution, the destabilization of Syria using death squads and commandos from the Muslim Brotherhood. I think that's failing. I think the Syrian army has basically quelled them. And then you look at Pakistan. Notice the big date is the 6th of September. Don't forget that date. The 6th of September is when General Petraeus moved from the Pentagon to the CIA. And what happened then? Within 2 or 3 days, we had that alert. On the 9/11 weekend, there was credible evidence of terrorism. Oh, my God. And then Petraeus is the guy who delivered the threat to Pakistan. It was Petraeus who met with the head of the ISI last week and said, we're blaming you for the Haqqani network. We're blaming you for the attacks on the U.S. Embassy and various assassinations in Kabul, Afghanistan. I think you're getting an increased push towards aggression as well as towards totalitarianism on the home front. And it's got General Petraeus's name on it. And let me just take this a little further. You look at the question of the Republican primaries. The constant drumbeat from the media is that no Republican candidate can win the election.
That's right. We need a savior. There's got to be somebody.
Savior.
Where is the man on the white horse? You know, please, Governor Christie, Jabba, save us.
We had Bachmann. So Bachmann has a boom and then a bust. Perry has a boom and then a bust. If it's Christie, he'll have a boom and a bust. What's the choreography behind all that? I think it plays into the hands of Petraeus.
I agree, and I've had insiders trying to influence me to support Petraeus. We quietly, a few months ago, talked on air about this, and so definitely the system is finagling to test the waters for fainting Petraeus.
And this, yes, exactly. Like Julius Caesar, he seems to have the falling sickness, right? If you look in Shakespeare. But with Petraeus, it's that somehow he's lurking in the background. He's not going to go and slog through the snows of New Hampshire. He's not going to go glad-handing people at Rotary meetings in Iowa. He doesn't want to do that. He wants to come in as the man on horseback, uniting the Pentagon and the CIA, using the Republican Party, but really floating above it because...
And we notice the social engineers always repeat the same plays. This is just like the Bushes and Brown Brother Harriman and others coming to Smedley Butler, the two-time Congressional Medal of Honor winner, the guy that's set to be the Marine Corps Commandant, and saying, we want to make you dictator. We'll run you in a sham election. We want you to lead 500,000 men. And he wasn't a fascist, but he played along with it long enough to expose them. And that's all part of history. And the McCormick-Dickstein Committee, as you know, brought all that out, Dr. Tarpley. And I do see a replay of this. And then all this fake right-wing talk on Fox and stuff about, ooh, there might be a military coup. I'm seeing that floated. They'll fix this, Obama. So very, very dangerous situation we see. And folks, don't think this won't happen. When countries and the world especially go into depressions, the move by the oligarchs, the finance oligarchs, is always to try to put strong military men in control. Webster, as a doctor of history, briefly explain why that's the case.
Well, if you look at the 1930s, we have this pattern, right? Which goes from world economic depression from 1929 to 1933. Then you get, in 1933, the Hitler regime, which is only one of a whole series of fascist governments. It started in Italy in 1922. The crisis hit them first. But as you go on later, basically most of the governments in continental Europe, especially Eastern continental Europe, become fascist in some way or other, be it Romania or Hungary or Poland or whatever it is. That's the first step, right? So depression comes first, then a dictatorship, right, as emergency rule. We have all kinds of pressure towards Bonapartism. There's some governor today says she wants to call off congressional elections for a couple of terms.
Yeah. That was the North Carolina governor, and it's been confirmed. Yeah. The audio's been released, and the newspaper's confirmed. She was serious. She said, let's suspend elections. Obama's talked about how great it would be if it could be his way. And we already have this super Congress where 12 men and women create the spending bills. That's unconstitutional. The president has this veto, a council of 13. Europe's moving towards a, quote, economic union in their crisis. The whole move is towards dictatorial, undemocratic systems.
Again, I would call it Bonapartism, because fascism is still a step beyond, because fascism implies a real mass movement. But you look at Petraeus, that's Bonapartism for the United States. The 12 tyrants, as you say, the super committee or super Congress, the 12 tyrants, they're churning away in the background, planning to destroy your economic security, take away your economic rights, strip you, flay you, all in the name of bigger and better bailouts for Wall Street. So Soros gets his money, Felix Rohatyn gets his money, the Koch brothers get theirs, and so on down the line. Just in terms of the protest against this, there is this Occupy Wall Street protest, and maybe that's worth a word or two. If you look at this, there are a lot of people there who are very well-meaning and who would be indispensable for profound social change. The problem is, this looks like a leaderless group, but it's not a leaderless group. You look at, there's a structure underneath it. And this, unfortunately, comes from the Service Employees International Union. It comes from ACORN. It comes from basically the orbit around the Soros group of foundations. And this is a counterinsurgency operation. The one thing you notice about the Occupy Wall Street, they have no demands. There's not one specific thing that they demand. They don't ask for anything. Rather, they're focused on their process, right? Their democratic assembly.
No, it's like Red Adair using dynamite to blow out a oil well that's on fire. They just want to dissipate it, set the precedent, and it's been proven Soros is involved. Other more libertarian groups have shown up, but really all they do is they have Warren Buffett and Soros calling for a middle class tax increase that they say is on the rich. They're actually offshore and exempt. They just want new taxes on the middle class to pay themselves in a new austerity bailout. So that's what I see, is this is a Soros branding of a movement to try to take control of the leadership of any movement that's going to expose Wall Street for the derivatives or all of their derivatives, bailout, corporate welfare. There's no discussion of corporate welfare. It's all raise taxes.
But there's no demands. They don't raise any demands, or demands like abolish capitalism or freedom now or stuff like this. I propose some demands for them. If you look at these people who are actually at this demonstration, the big problem they all have is student loans. Right now, the younger people in the United States are groaning. They're getting crushed under $1 trillion of high-interest student loans. And this essentially it means that an entire generation of Americans is going to be wiped out. They can't create families, they can't get married, they can't buy homes, their credit rating is shot because they come out of college with $50,000, $75,000, $100,000 of student loans. The most obvious demand to make is an amnesty on student loans. Cancel those loans. When you have Greece, right? They say Greece can't pay. Exactly, they can't pay. The bankers will have to take a haircut. Yes, a haircut.
It's time to default on those. Exactly.
Don't default, but just cancel them.
Well, let me ask you this question. Let me ask you this question then. What is the point then of the Sorosian groups undoubtedly orchestrating this? And again, I'm not saying everybody there. It's a diverse group, but overall, certainly the media is giving voice to the people there, and they're not really. I mean, I've been watching them. Their main demand is tax middle-class people and pay it to Warren Buffett and George Soros and bailouts. Yeah,
if that, because generally it's this crazy.
No, I've been watching it, Webster. That's what they're saying.
Yeah, I mean, I look too.
Look, watch the mainstream media. It's George Soros every day saying, I'm exempt from taxes. Raise my taxes. Well, he's exempt because he helped write the loopholes to be offshore. I'm all for getting rid of that. The point is, the plan they push is an Obama tax increase, which we all know you put taxes on right now, the general public, it'll stall the economy further.
The question is, the goal of Soros and his panoply of foundations and other operations is to make that the Occupy Wall Street into the left wing of re-elect Obama. Because if you come in there with these generic, vague demands, abolish capitalism, establish justice, freedom now, then Obama can say, yeah, of course, that's exactly what I'll give you.
And by the way, they are saying that then basically, really, in my view, discredits an anti-corrupt Wall Street movement by making it communistic in the general public's eye. That's like in the 60s, they'd have FBI operatives dress up like hippies and break out windows and spit on troops.
For these people, I would propose a couple of tests. Are you in favor of the war in Libya, or are you against it? Because if you're in favor of the Libyan war, you're an agent. The other thing is, cancel the student loan debt. Amnesty. Carter had an amnesty for people left over from Vietnam, right? You were a draft resistor in the Vietnam era. Carter gave you an amnesty. Great. Obama, give an amnesty to these students on their
because there are no jobs for them to come to, and they know this, and college education is a complete fraud now for how much it costs.
In terms of taxes, the obvious tax is the Wall Street sales tax, the Tobin tax, a 1% tax on all Wall Street
turnover. But instead, Wall Street has Herman Cain and all their other whores promoting a general new VAT or sales tax on us to pay them the money in bailouts.
It's a disaster. The value-added tax is an absolute disaster. These are regressive taxes. We don't need them. We need progressive taxes. But more than anything, more than taxes on any individual, tax Wall Street banks and financial institutions, because that's what is not taxed. Others can argue that they're taxed.
Yeah, that's the group that has a free hand to wreck the entire society. So listen, Webster, we're running out of time here. I've got to talk to you about the overall world financial crisis. That's where you're the real expert at. And then dovetail that with what is the leader of Iran, Ahmadinejad, what is he doing having the head of their Navy come out and say we're going to put ships off the U.S.? Sure, I get the tit for tat. There's U.S. and European ships all around them and right up in their face, in their grill, as the trendies would say today. But still, Iran has done well to not be provocative. Why would they want to give an entree into conflict?
Well, the great principle of international relations, of course, is reciprocity. And whatever you insist on doing to somebody else, eventually somebody else will do to you. So I would not recommend gestures of this kind. But on the other hand, you have to think about his domestic political audience and the idea to maybe knock these elites in the West a little bit off balance. Certainly, we see Chinese vessels now, warships in the Mediterranean, a couple of Iranian corvettes or frigates in the North Atlantic. Not going to make any military difference. It's largely symbolic, and I think largely for domestic consumption. So I don't think that's so outrageous.
So it's tough guy saber rattling because the Iranians are tired of the spy flights and the ships all around them. It's their military acting tough, a little bit of chest beating.
Yeah, I think today the announcement from Iran was that they've now got a cruise missile which has gone into mass production. So it's the other side of the coin is don't come into our nearby territorial waters or you're going to have trouble. But the big international crisis, of course, is we're now in the second wave of the Depression, right? 1929 was the first, 1931, the European banking crisis, the second, and then a U.S. banking panic in 1933 was the third. This time it's the Lehman Brothers crisis 3 years ago. That was the first wave. Now we're in the European banking panic. It's a banking panic. It's not a sovereign debt crisis or anything else. It's a crisis of the banks. And you can look at these banks, SocGen, Crédit Agricole, Barclays Bank, Deutsche Bank, and all the rest of them. These are the focus of the crisis. And what you have now is the inability of the European Commission, especially Barroso, the Portuguese politician coming from a fascist political background, the guy who gave the State of the European Union today. He wants Eurobonds. It's crazy. You can't bail out derivatives. There are too many derivatives. The European share of derivatives is at least $500 trillion of bankrupt, kited derivatives.
Well, Webster, you've been, in closing, you've been talking about this for a decade. We're talking 1.5 quadrillion. And no matter how many bailouts there are in Europe, as you have rightfully said, it's never going to fix it. Now the IMF needs one. Now they want this new, quote, economic union, and they openly say, get rid of what's left of European sovereignty. I've heard them on Bloomberg say the democracy of Germany is bad because they don't want to go along with it. I mean, they're so naked now. So where do you see this going?
Well, until you change policies, the depression gets worse and worse. And of course, the policies that would change something would be one of the things I said before, the Wall Street sales tax, the Tobin tax. There are people in Europe who want to have a Tobin tax, and that would be a good step, except you got to make sure the money goes to the national treasuries to maintain your social safety net. The other thing is you want to get a recovery, you got to attack the Federal Reserve, and here's how you do it. You got to force Bernanke, either by law or by leaning on him, by political pressure. Bernanke, you've been giving 0% credit to banks, to credit card companies, to everybody who's a financial speculator.
In some case, less than zero, Webster.
Gets, 0% or less in terms of credit. What the Fed would have to do to get a recovery is announce that they're going to buy $1 trillion of bonds from American states at a 0% coupon and a 100-year maturity. So
exactly, loan the fiat directly into the states and the people instead of to offshore constellations that loan it back at 30% interest.
Exactly, and this is now federal lending. We don't want to go.
But what I don't like about the fake right-wingers is they'll say corporate welfare, let the banks have $10 trillion in bailout or whatever, but then they'll sit there and talk about a welfare mom all day. You know, my issue is I don't want dependency. I want to get folks off welfare. I mean, I want them off of it. But the bigger issue is how does Rush Limbaugh and all these guys promote this giant corporate largesse? Well, they of course get the news is they get paid for their views. In other words, not just the ads on those programs, but also the actual content of what they say is bought and paid for by various reactionary interests. But the question with the Federal Reserve is it's got to be nationalized. There's a tremendous credit-creating power that belongs to the American people, and we want it, and we want to use it. So start with $1 trillion. Buy these 0% bonds from states, 100-year maturity, to build what? To rebuild the interstate highway system, to rebuild the entire rail system, passenger freight, and bridges, infrastructure that makes
electrical grid.
Instead, the globalist model. Instead, Webster, the globalist model is to slap toll roads on already taxpayer-paid-for existing roads and call it free market. That's not free market; it's robbery.
Then you better factor in the expense of learning Chinese, because that's who's going to be giving you orders. So you got to rebuild your infrastructure. And again, public buildings, schools, hospitals, absolutely. Water projects, a huge question, especially in the arid areas of the West, right? So you wouldn't have such a drought in Texas if you had adequate irrigation facilities. So $1 trillion, and that can go either to states or to something like, the Port Authority of New York, New Jersey.
Well, it has been proven that infrastructure projects it's one of the only government things that actually does something, creates a chain reaction in wealth in the areas it's built.
Right, and the contracts go to the private sector. In other words, the federal government, the Fed, the nationalized Fed, or partly nationalized anyway, nationalized enough to give out $1 trillion for these things. The money goes to the states. The states then make sure that it goes into infrastructure and only infrastructure. Those are capital goods. So that means you're increasing your capital goods stock and you're increasing the productivity of labor. And that's how you get a multiplier. You can't start with consumer spending. You got to start with
buying more Chinese slave baubles isn't going to get us out of this mess. But Webster, here's my final point. Those that watch this and criticize you as a socialist or something, they don't understand from your
American system.
No. This is American system. But let me stop you. How can they then support 16, 25, whatever, the numbers are different, trillion in banker bailouts that went nowhere when infrastructure would actually go to the people in the building of it and then the use of it and then the maintaining of it? There's no debate. In closing, Vladimir Putin, before I even heard he got a facelift, boom, so you can see the facelift. He's coming back. Medvedev, his little minion, is agreeing with it. I always saw that as a fake ruse. You thought there was a split there. 1 minute on Vladimir Putin and what's happening in Russia.
I think the fact that Putin is coming back as president is one of the best things that's happened all year. And not only do we get Putin again as a strong leader for Russia, we get Putin minus Kudrin. Because Putin, he was able to engineer this. He basically played Kudrin, the finance minister, against Medvedev. Kudrin thought that he was going to become the next prime minister, that Medvedev would be dumped completely. Now, therefore, it's a masterpiece by Putin to play these one against the other and get rid of Kudrin. So now we have, in many ways, the best of all possible worlds, at least for the moment in Russia, that you have Putin and no Kudrin. You look at the American press, look at the Washington Post, look at the Wall Street Journal. They're apoplectic. They can't stand it. When the financier newspapers...
No, I know the New World Order doesn't like Putin. I'm still creeped out by a Russian strongman. I mean, my only issue is, why can't Russia ever have a real election, have a new leader? Or are you saying they want Putin for life?
Putin is the most popular candidate, and based on a democratic election, Putin is gonna win it. The power of Medvedev was simply foreign support, the overwhelming support of the IMF, of the U.S., the Federal Reserve, the European Central Bank. Europe.
And did Putin let them put in Medvedev as kind of a scam to go ahead and get the foreign investment that's been double-crossed that?
Part of it is this question of the Constitution, right? That you're not allowed to have more than 2 terms in a row.
So Putin thought, put a weakling in for a few years and folks will wish for me again.
Right. Let's take an example. If we had had Putin in power this year, I don't think the Libyan war would have happened because Putin would have vetoed it. It was the weakness of Medvedev, as pointed out by Russian Ambassador Chamov to Libya. What Medvedev did was really a betrayal of Russian national interest by supporting this crazy attack on Libya. Medvedev even said, we'll send peacekeeping troops. This is absolutely crazy. You can't get anywhere by betraying your allies.
So where does the effeminate Medvedev go now?
Oh, he'll be prime minister, and well, he may be prime minister, and that's that's maybe unavoidable. The one thing, I was talking to a well-informed Russian yesterday, and she said the danger now is the transition period between now, where it's clear what the plan is, and the actual election and inauguration. They're expecting attempts to destabilize the country. In other words, the U.S. and the British are going to say, my God, if Putin makes a comeback, we'll never have a color revolution. We can't do our CIA people power coup. Let's rev up the Chechens. Let's rev up some terrorism.
They'll start having jihadis blow the hell out of Russia.
Something like this, yes.
All right, Webster, we got to leave it there.
The other one is also just Serbia, right? Notice there's a big shooting incident today on the border of Serbia and this Kosovo criminal enterprise. That's also that's the beginning of a destabilization.
Well, you're being an extremist, not saying the jihadis are great people. It's good that Al-Qaeda has been given Libya. According to our media, and I support our mainstream media, Webster, it's very evil that you're anti-Al-Qaeda. Tarpley.net.
Incorrigible.
Webster, thanks for talking to us.
Thank you always, Alex.